Uncle ruined the 4th of July forever, and let me tell you how.
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes. Look at you.
Do something with it.
It's just money coming to me easily. Money coming in and needing me. Money coming in repeatedly. Money coming, it's just money coming. It's just money coming to me frequently. Money coming in to be with me. Money coming in secretly. Money coming, it's just money coming. It's just money coming to me always. Money coming in all day. Money coming in all paid. Money coming, it's just money coming. It's just money coming to me frequently. Money coming in to be with me.
Uncle ruined the 4th of July forever, and let me tell you how. 2004, we had just moved into our new place. This is when I was like, well, it's 2004, so y'all know that I was like young or whatever. Just had moved, and we moved on the 1st of July, and then the 4th came around, and we were just in the house chilling or whatever. And my aunt had came over and was like, oh, come on, let's, like come down the road or whatever. We're cooking out or something like that. My mom didn't want to go out the house at all. And she just wasn't feeling it that day. So we convinced her to go out or whatever, to go to my own house. So we all went. It was fun. We went in the back of the truck. That's like one of those times where you could be on the back of a pickup truck. Good time. And before we went to my own house, we went to the ice cream shop, got ice cream. It was a good time. So the night approached and we got a phone call, and they said that my uncle had gotten into an accident, and I think that they already had pronounced him like unalived. Like, it was crazy. It just felt like unreal. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, I seen it or whatever. I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? And she said like she seen or pictured like my uncle having an accident on his motorcycle. Come to find out, my uncle had a massive heart attack on his motorcycle the night of the 4th of July, 2004. And for a long time, the 4th of July has been like super hard to deal with. When he first passed away, we celebrated him like every year, but of course things changed, all that stuff. But yeah, that's how my uncle ruined the 4th of July forever.
This girl told this story is giving how dare my uncle die on 4th of July. Because what do you mean he ruined 4th of July forever? The man lost his life. I thought she was going to say he did something, maybe messed up all the food or whatever the case may be. But this girl talking about my uncle ruined 4th of July forever. How dare he die on 4th of July? How dare he had a heart attack? That was a crazy story. Let me know what you think, but that's what I got from the story. Anyways, let's get to the next story. Hey y'all, welcome back to All Things Jenny. I'm Jenny. I want to take the time to wish everyone happy 4th of July. I hope you have an amazing weekend. I hope you're able to come together with your family and your loved ones and celebrate 4th of July. And if you decide not to celebrate 4th of July this year, it is up to you. But I do want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July. Try not to eat too much burgers and hot dogs, and have a good time, and also stay away from trouble. And also what I like to say as well is be careful with the fireworks, because when I used to work at the hospital, honey, people will come to the hospital in the middle of the night, throughout 4th of July, and also the next day of fingers missing, parts of limbs missing, because they have been blown up by fireworks. So be very careful, and please enjoy these very spooky 4th of July stories. I wanted to bring you guys a bunch of stories so you can listen to while you're cooking, while you're celebrating 4th of July. Please enjoy, and please be.
On July 4th of 2018, I saw a ghost at Disneyland. It was uncommonly cool and misty that day, so much so that I'm wearing the same outfit today that I was then. A sweater and my shorts. My family and I had passes that year, so we'd seen the fireworks a million times before. What we really wanted to do were to get onto some rides. The Haunted Mansion was a perfect opportunity. It was completely empty, except for one gentleman that was in front of us. He was maybe 20 yards in front of us. So we got in the ride, and as we passed the ballroom, it got extremely cold. I mean, icy cold. And as the carriage turned around in front of us, the man that was in front of us was no longer there, gone, completely gone. My husband and I jumped so high, we grabbed each other's knees, and we both said at the same time, "Did you see that?" Luckily, our little kids were tiny. They did not register what had happened, but he and I will never forget that. As soon as we got off that ride, we asked the workers, "Is there a ghost on this ride?" And they said, "We've seen him before."
This happened just last year. My buddy Jimmy is pretty involved and well connected within the music community. By music community, I'm more specifically referring to the dance/electronic music scene all along the East Coast, predominantly New Jersey and New York. It's actually pretty impressive what he and his team have been able to accomplish in just 2 years. The general gist is this: their company hosts what they call events at high-profile venues, typically the most well-known club or party space in whatever city they happen to be in. Then they outsource the talent, which, mind you, is typically a very well-known and sometimes borderline famous DJ. I'm not too involved or invested in that scene, so I'm not exactly sure who they've gotten to perform, but I will tell you that there have been some huge names in the mix. But enough context. Jimmy and I go way back. I'm talking 20 plus years. I've basically known him my entire life, and he's been my best friend for damn near most of it. Because of that, he lets me, along with a bunch of our other hometown friends, come to his shows for free and hang out with the talent in the VIP section. It's actually really cool, and something I wish I expressed my gratitude for more often. Jimmy was scheduled to host a huge event the weekend of July 4th on the Jersey Shore. It was going to be their biggest one yet, and all our mutual friends were going. Jimmy invited me to come down early with him, and I obviously obliged. The two of us made the hour-and-a-half drive with our other friend Ryan, and we found ourselves at the venue a good 4 hours before the doors opened. Ryan and I didn't have much to do while Jimmy and his team set up, so we decided to get a bit of a head start on the alcohol consumption. Jimmy and his team were entitled to as much free booze as they desired, compliments of the venue, and Ryan and I definitely took advantage of that. By the time the first DJ started his set, Ryan and I were more than a little buzzed, to put it mildly. It was 4th of July weekend after all, so we felt like our degenerate activities were justified. Fast forward a couple hours, and Ryan and I were completely wasted. I honestly don't remember a time since then when I was that drunk, not even close. Don't get me wrong, Ryan and I are grown men and we can handle our alcohol. Throwing up, making fools of ourselves wasn't the issue though. It was genuinely just the problem of having lower impulse control and worse decision making. But either way, we were having a great time, at least from what I can remember. The event was winding down, and it was getting to that point in the night where you either figured out how you were getting home, or who you were going home with, or both. Jimmy had rented an Airbnb really close by, and promised both Ryan and I a bed, so the first issue wasn't a concern. The second problem, though, that was what was on my mind. The two of us danced over to the bar and started talking to some girls we found attractive, and before long, we had figured out who we were going to spend the rest of the night with. Neither of us are Calvin Klein models, but we're both above 6 feet tall. For whatever reason, the vast majority of guys who hang around the Jersey Shore are usually shorter than average, so being tall is an even bigger boost than it usually is. And for whatever reason, that seems to be the main attribute most girls on the Jersey Shore seek out. Not looks, not build, not intelligence, but height. Don't ask me why. The Jerseyan female mind is still something I have yet to comprehend. I'm probably botching their names, but I'm fairly sure the two girls introduced themselves as Gianna and Marcela. Us meeting them coincides with where my ability to recall events precisely becomes a bit hazy, so there may be gaps in the story from here on out. From what I can remember, it was actually Marcela who suggested we all leave together and continue to party elsewhere, which Ryan and I weren't going to argue with. Gianna handed the two of us a drink and insisted that we get on their level before heading out, even though we had both probably consumed the fluid equivalent of her body weight in alcohol already. I know that whole dynamic. Girls getting guys drinks sounds a little unorthodox, and it is, but these girls were clearly wealthy given how they were dressed. After downing the drinks, the four of us started moving towards the venue's exit. The moment we stepped outside, Marcela suggested we go back to her place, which was pretty close by, and also right on the beach. Her saying that actually surprised me a little. I was fully anticipating going back to our Airbnb, considering the guys were usually the ones to host in situations like this. But both girls insisted that Marcela's beach house was definitely nicer than whatever inland Airbnb we found for the night. She had a point, so I didn't argue, and neither did Ryan. We walked along the beach, talking the whole time. The girls seemed really intelligent and knowledgeable based on the conversations we had, and I remember finding it so refreshing to talk about something other than nightlife and whatever other garbage I'm used to talking to girls about for once. Not just girls, drunk people in general. At one point, I actually felt kind of embarrassed for being so drunk because I felt like I couldn't articulate myself well enough and looked like an idiot. That's when I realized I actually was feeling drunker than I had been 15 minutes earlier. But it wasn't a drunk I was used to feeling. I felt like my body was melting under my weight, as if I were going to collapse uncontrollably any second. My legs felt flimsy, almost like cardboard, if that makes any sense. Moving my limbs, mouth, and even my eyes became increasingly more difficult, and there was a moment where my extremities started feeling a little numb. But then, just as quickly as the feeling arose, it passed, back to normal drunkenness, at least for the time being. Just then, we arrived at the beach house. It was insane. I'm probably exaggerating because I was so drunk, but it looked like what I imagined a professional athlete's beach house to look like. We went inside, and after taking our shoes off, found ourselves in what I'm guessing was a living room. I say guessing because the level of opulence in there was just so foreign to anything I'm used to. It was decorative, but somehow minimalistic. Even those descriptions are opposite. There were honest-to-God sculptures on pedestals in there, but it didn't feel cluttered or overly showy, and everything on display seemed to blend right into the walls like they were just extensions of the room. I wish I had the wherewithal to take a picture, but again, my mind was elsewhere. Evidently, so was Ryan's, because not 15 minutes after stepping foot in the house, he and Marcela had disappeared somewhere in that maze of a house, which left me alone with Gianna. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's the last thing I remember before blacking out. Not her kissing me, but leaning in to kiss me. That's where everything cuts off. I don't remember feeling woozy again or drinking more or doing anything else, but there's a huge gap in my memory that spans several hours and will not come back no matter what I try. And the thing is, I know I didn't pass out because there are texts on my phone sent from me proving I was still conscious. There's digital proof that I was sentient, but I don't remember one bit of it. And before you say I just simply blacked out from alcohol, this was different. I rarely ever black out, but all the times I have, I can still remember bits and pieces of the night, scattered moments here and there, enough for me to string together a continuous sequence of events at the very least. Keep in mind, those were also all times where I was drunker than I was that night. So that's another reason I think a generic blackout isn't a reasonable explanation for what happened. Plus, Ryan experienced the exact same thing at essentially the exact same time, which is way too specific to be coincidental. Here's the next thing I remember. Waking up with the sun directly overhead, in a random set of bushes over an hour away from where the event was. Something I didn't know yet because my phone wasn't in my pocket. In fact, nothing was in my pocket at all. Both my wallet and keys were gone, but it gets worse. It wasn't even my pocket to begin with. I was wearing someone else's clothes, and not Ryan's either, a complete stranger's. The only personal belonging of mine I still had in my possession was my shoes, and even those were messed up. Both shoes had the shoelaces removed and were soaking wet. My head was pounding, and everything felt disoriented, like I was waking up from anesthesia. I didn't even sit up right away. I just stared at the sky for a minute, trying to make sense of where I was. Bushes, someone else's clothes, no wallet, no phone, no keys. Based on my shoes, it was like I had been in the water recently, but it didn't smell like salt water or chlorine. The worst part about the whole thing was the blankness. I genuinely couldn't remember anything past Gianna leaving, like I already said. That's when the panic started to creep in. I wasn't just hungover, I was scared. I had no idea how I got there. What if I'd gotten into a fight or crashed a car? What if someone drugged me? I didn't have a single point of reference for the last 10 hours. I stood up and realized there wasn't a single landmark around me. It didn't look like a beach town, which also scared me. The road ahead just curved into more trees, but just across the street, maybe a few hundred feet away, was a 7-Eleven. It was genuinely the only thing in sight, so I headed straight for it. I asked the guy behind the counter if I could use his phone, telling him that mine had been stolen. He stared at me for a second, probably debating whether or not I was trying to scam him, but then he slid it across the counter. The first number that came to my mind was my sister's. It was the only number besides my mom or dad's I still memorized, and there was no way in hell I was calling my parents. My sister picked up right away, and I tried explaining things the best I could. She ended up giving me Ryan's number, which I ended up calling several times, but to no avail. That's when I started wondering if what had happened to me happened to him too. Drugged, robbed, dumped in some random bushes an hour away. I was just about to call the police, when what do you know, Ryan walks into the same 7-Eleven. We just stared at each other for a second before dabbing each other up. He then told me his version of things, and you guessed it, it was the same story. Damn near exactly. That sealed it for us. We called the police, making sure to thank the 7-Eleven worker profusely. Fast forward a few minutes, and we're now recounting our story to the police outside the store. To their credit, they took everything we said seriously, at first. But the more we told them, the more their questions started turning. Were we sure we didn't just drink too much? Maybe we wandered off and passed out somewhere. They weren't accusing us outright, but it was clear they weren't entirely convinced something criminal happened. I told them it was unlikely we would have drunkenly wandered into a town an hour away by foot, and I don't think they liked that remark very much. I gave them my sister's number and asked them to call her. She was already tracking my phone through Find My iPhone. To all of our collective surprise, my phone was showing up in the middle of a parking lot a few minutes' drive away. The officers agreed to drive us, and sure enough, both our phones were sitting on the pavement next to each other. While it was great to have my phone back, that only affirmed the police's theory that we had just been drunk. They started saying that we probably hadn't even been robbed, that we had lost our wallets the same way we had lost our phones. We tried convincing the police to check out the house Marcela brought us to, the one she claimed was hers, but they weren't having it. They told us we were probably just too drunk and didn't remember things correctly. One of them even said it happens more than you think. Then they gave us their cards and told us to call if we remembered anything else. It was actually shocking how reluctant they were to even connect us to other officers that would be willing to help. They told us to find a ride home since our phones were still charged, and they just left us there. After they left, I went through my phone for the first time, and things got even weirder. There were texts sent from me to a ton of people I knew. Jimmy, my parents, a few coworkers, even some girls I had been talking to. All normal sounding stuff. Stuff I might have said if I had actually had a calm, coherent night. The texts genuinely sounded like me, but from a continuity standpoint, they didn't make any sense when considered all together. One message to Jimmy thanked him for the event and said we'd crashed at a buddy's place. One to my dad said we were safe and had found a couch to sleep on. There was another to a girl I'd been texting that just said something casual, like I was hanging out at home and thinking about her. None of those texts made any sense, and mostly contradicted each other. I realized I had a ton of missed calls and texts from Jimmy, so I called him. He sounded relieved to hear from me, saying he thought Ryan and I had died or something. He told us to stay put, he'd come pick us up. In the meantime, Ryan and I canceled all our cards, but interestingly, none of them had been used, despite the likely fact that they had been in those girls' possession for several hours. The entire ride home, we talked non-stop about what could have happened. None of it made any sense. Yeah, we had been drugged, that much was clear, but that didn't explain things. First of all, I don't know of any kind of roofie that has those effects, like an induced blackout. Everything I've read just said those drugs make you fall asleep, but again, I was conscious, as the texts confirm. Plus, why go to such lengths just to rob two random guys? Especially if you weren't going to at least even attempt to use their credit cards. Two guys who walked up to you, no less. And in such a risky place, too. Your own house. Or was it the house they had broken into? Both were equally risky. Jimmy thought we had been targeted, but like I just said, we had been the ones to approach the girls, so we couldn't have been targeted. And all this isn't even mentioning how or why we miraculously found ourselves in a random town an hour away wearing other people's clothing. As crazy as it sounds, both Ryan and I checked ourselves for incisions, thinking maybe some of our organs had been harvested, but there was nothing. Jimmy suggested that maybe they had just given us some exotic drugs, which I guess makes sense, but someone had driven us to that town, and someone other than those girls had switched clothes with us. We never got an answer, but it's not like we just forgot about the whole thing. Ryan and I ended up driving all the way back to the shore just to go looking for that house. We tried our best to retrace our steps, knowing that if we just walked along the boardwalk, we'd eventually find the house, since it was on the beach. And we actually did find it. The two of us walked up the walkway and rang the doorbell. An older man opened the door, asking us what we wanted. I did the talking. Not wanting to reveal too much or potentially incriminate myself, I simply asked him if a girl named Marcela lived here, or if he had a daughter or granddaughter around our age. He gave me a hard no, and I made up some BS story that there was a girl who lied about owning this house, which he actually found pretty funny. And that was that. I would be lying if I said I didn't walk away from that house with a sick, unsettling feeling in my stomach. I can't even describe it as fear, just a sickening discomfort, like something truly awful had happened to me and my friend that night, and I'd never get to the bottom of it. For a long time after that, I was convinced those girls had been involved in something much, much bigger that neither me nor Ryan could even conceive. That maybe they had been planning to kidnap or kill us, and decided not to go through with it at the last second for whatever reason. I know I'll never have an update, but if something else happens, I'll definitely send something. My name's Ariel, and I live in Georgia, not too far from the Alabama border. Several summers ago, I made the drive out to this small town in Alabama for a 4th of July cookout my college friend Isabel was throwing. One of those backyard setups with paper plates, bootleg fireworks, and way too much food. It was one of the better nights I'd had in a while. Good people, good energy, kids running around with sparklers, that kind of thing. I didn't leave until a little after 10, which, looking back, was probably my first mistake. That part of the state gets real quiet once the sun goes down. The drive home was going to take a little over 2 hours. Most of the route was back roads, long, empty, dark, 2-lane roads with nothing but thick tree lines on either side. Every now and then, I'd pass an old farmhouse or a tiny church with a gravel lot, but for the most part, it was just darkness and more darkness. I had music playing low, and I was still in a good mood from the party, but I won't lie, there was something about driving through places like that at night that gets under my skin, even when there's no real reason to be afraid. I've always been somewhat scared of the dark, so I bet that plays into it a little too. About 30 minutes in, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured someone else had just hopped onto the same back road. But the longer it stayed there, the more I started to pay attention. It was a gray Nissan Altima, nothing unusual, except the bottom half of the car looked like it had been driving through mud. I could see it clearly anytime we passed one of those overhead lights at a small crossing. Even still, that wasn't that weird on its own. But after a while, I realized no matter how much I sped up or slowed down, that car matched me exactly. At first, I thought it might have been just a coincidence, so I sped up a little, maybe 5-10 miles an hour over what I was doing before, but the Altima did the same, so I instead tapped my brakes and let myself drift well below the limit. Again, same results. The distance between us never changed. Now keep in mind, on roads like that, people pass each other all the time. It's not even illegal in most spots. I moved slightly to the right a couple times to make it obvious that I was giving the space they needed if they want to go around, but they didn't. They just stayed exactly where they were, about 6 or 7 car lengths back. That's when I decided to test them. There was a random left turn coming up. It was what looked like a little residential road with maybe 4 houses scattered on either side. I took the turn with no hesitation. I wanted to get as far away from that car as possible. But about 10 seconds later, the car actually turned off and made the same left turn in the middle of nowhere. There was about a 0% chance they belonged on that road. At that point, I knew for a fact they were following me. It wasn't even up for debate anymore. I got this really sick feeling in my gut, like I was in genuine danger. For all I knew, I probably was. By then, my heart was beating through my chest, the same way it would if someone had a gun to my head. I don't know why, but that's the easiest analogy I can think of. I just felt so helpless out there in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea what that person wanted or why they were locked onto me, but none of the reasons I could think of did anything but terrify me. I just wanted to get somewhere safe and somewhere public, with lights and people. As if on cue, I heard that god-awful chime that indicates a near-empty gas tank. I swear to God, I've never felt so powerless. My car's old. It's a 2012 Corolla that's been through more than its fair share of problems. Sometimes the gas light gives me 20 miles. Sometimes I'm lucky to get 10. And out there, in that part of the state, there's not exactly a gas station on every corner. I pulled out my phone and looked up the nearest 24-hour spot. It was over 8 miles away. I didn't know if I'd make it, but I didn't.
Hi everybody, welcome to Shivers and happy 4th of July week. Today we are talking all about the most iconic ways that people have unalived themselves throughout the season of 4th of July, mixing in a little bit of 1,000 Ways to Die also. So getting started, talking about a couple of these real life horrors, this tragedy that happens on the 4th of July. You know, there's a lot of booze, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. When you really think about 4th of July, it's a recipe for disaster. What our first example is a pretty famous example from Jason Pierre-Paul. This happened in 2015. Jason Pierre-Paul was an NFL player, and he, on the 4th of July in 2015, blew part of his hand off by holding on to a firework. He survived, and now, of course, he can no longer play in the NFL, but it was a really big iconic moment for not only the NFL community, but also just a crazy mishap that happened on the 4th of July. Continuing on with that, in Indiana in 2024, a man put a firework on the top of his head, believing that it was going to be a joke, something that was just going to be a dud, It wasn't a dare, it wasn't anything that was even a game, and immediately just fatal accident from that example as well. In 2022, a father of 2 in Texas tried to launch a mortar-style firework from a metal tube that backfired, killing him in front of his family. And after that, there are certainly 1,000 more examples of iconic firework deaths. A couple of boating disasters to mention as well. There is a lake called Lake Lanier in Georgia, and this people believe is just a truly unlucky lake. This has over 700 accidents, deaths, anything like that from the 1950s and onward. More recently than not, a whole group of friends for the 4th of July in 2023 went out on their boat, had a good time. 2 of them drowned, and 1 of them got hit by another boat while looking for their friends. So again, I don't know what the landscape is for Lake Lanier in Georgia. If it's hard to see, if it's overcrowded, I don't know. But all I know is this seems like a very unlucky place to go. So good luck to you if you are planning on spending your 4th of July in Georgia at that lake. For guns, this is obviously not a political podcast whatsoever, but a lot of times people will use fireworks as a cover for shooting guns into the air, anything like that. So in California in 2021, there were a couple of accidents in particular, but one specifically was a teen who was accidentally killed by a gunshot that went off in the air and fell back down onto their head. So this was all during a backyard barbecue, again on the 4th of July. So I don't have today's episode being a bummer necessarily for a reason. It's just a little bit themed for the season and to bring about a little awareness, I guess, to the 4th of July. For what I have always enjoyed is 1,000 Ways to Die. This was a really older TV show on Spike TV. It was very campy, very fun. It doesn't air anymore, but they have close to, if not over 1,000 episodes. And these are all very dramatic versions of real life deaths that have occurred. So for our first one to mention for the 4th of July, this was episode 10 from 2009, so pretty early on. So this was a group of, the actual episode is explained this way, so I want to make that clear. A group of rednecks attempt to celebrate the 4th of July by launching a homemade firework from a homemade launcher. When it fails to work, one of them looks down the barrel of the launcher and the firework explodes in his face, shattering his skull into his brain. This happened in real life on July 4th, 1983. So, even still, calling people rednecks anymore is a little bit out. But episode 10 from 2009, taking a real life horror accident that happened in 1983. Another example of an episode was a man in Nebraska. This did actually happen. Drinks on the 4th of July, gets fired up, grabs an actual firework and puts it into his butt crack. It explodes and he passes away immediately. Episode 797 from 2016. This is obviously a little bit newer than episode 10, but it's called Barbie Killed. Very creative name. So, someone lights a grill with bug spray instead of lighter fluid. Flash fire, boom, entire backyard goes up in flames. This is a real death from 2016, so they made this episode not terribly long after the actual real life death of this person. But it was said in the real life story that this was a husband and a wife. The wife wanted the backyard barbecue grill turned on, ready to go for all their guests for the 4th of July. This husband said, the grill doesn't work, don't bother, we're not going to fix it, it's not going to work. She goes outside anyway, tries to light it with something other than propane, tries to use bug spray, at least in the 1,000 Ways to Die story, and goes up in flames. There's another episode that I wanted to mention. It's not really 4th of July themed, but it's the hot dog chokehold, Bomb 8 Dead. episode 323 from 2010. So this episode is reflective of an actual real life story of a competitive eater. So anytime we're thinking about 4th of July, we're thinking about hot dogs, hamburgers, eating contests even. And for a lot of these competitive eaters, many people, especially in the health community, will talk about all the nutrition and the bad things that go along with that. This episode completely flips all of that on its head and says that this competitive eater eats 60 hot dogs in 10 minutes, collapses from choking and heat stroke, wakes up, throws up onto the person who's near him, so much so that the person who's near him gets a piece of an unconsumed hot dog in their mouth, chokes and dies. A real true life story, but also very dramatic on 1,000 Ways to Die. So I wanted to bring that up just for the sheer absurdity of it, and also RIP to all of these people. From the actual folklore side of things, so when we think about the 4th of July, we're really thinking about everything from independence, America, I'm not a history buff, but we're going back to a lot of the freedom aspects. And from the folklore perspective, there are a lot of people who take that very seriously. They will then spend their 4th of July at some of these memorial cemeteries, these memorial ghost towns, things like that. Gettysburg is one of the most highly traveled to places for the 4th of July, which is kind of surprising because, to me, I would think that the 4th of July is more partying, drinking, barbecuing, that type of thing. But to have an appreciation for the actual history and the memorial nature of it, I think is pretty cool. So Fort McHenry in particular, everybody will also go to Fort McHenry. This is like the second most location. People say that they hear soldiers popping off fireworks and phantom cannon fire every 4th of July. There's online video evidence, there's YouTube videos, they're pretty crazy. There's also a lot of phantom parades. So in some of these more historic locations, Gettysburg included, you have a lot of actual 4th of July parades that are celebrating the wartime memory of the actual holiday, and also acknowledging some of the folklore, some of the ghost stories, some of the hauntings that have taken place since then. So it's interesting to me, being a horror fan and being a paranormal fan, to actually see a lot of this folklore stem to a very human, very normal, drinking heavy type of holiday. But I think it's really relevant and I think it's nice. So that's really all we have for today. I know it's a little bit different. I know it feels maybe a little bit dreadful, but it's just all for the fun of 4th of July. Also, of course, that PSA of be careful, don't hold fireworks, don't put fireworks on top of your head. Be smart, be safe, and come back next week for our regularly scheduled program of horror and Halloween, and every day being Halloween. Thank you as always for listening, and I will see you next time.
Uncle Sam visited our house. Waking up in the morning, I would find my dad standing near the table, lecturing me on how to behave.
Now remember, I don't want you talking to him unless I'm around. You hear? Yes, Dad. I'm serious. Now tuck in your shirt. He's here.
The front door swung open and there stood Uncle Sam, dressed unusually.
Happy 4th of July!
He was really proud to be an American, so every 4th of July he would wear a suit designed like the national flag. He would match that with his tall hat, which looked even more bizarre.
No,
Uncle Tommy said, turning to me and lowering himself to a knee.
Where's my hug at? Been a while since I saw you last.
I took a couple of steps toward him and leaned in for a hug. His tight embrace made me uncomfortable, and I let out a light whimper.
Why do you always see you wearing full sleeves?
He asked, tugging at my long sleeves.
Well, they're my dad's favorite. Oh, you poor thing.
He then turned towards my dad and said,
Let the boy have some fun, Jack. Don't you remember how much fun you used to have when you were his age?
I saw my dad's face turn red.
Here's why you should always stay home on the 4th of July. This person just moved into their new apartment after having to move twice due to run-ins with a stalker. Due to some uneasiness from their past experience, they decide to move in just across from the police station, fire department, and garbage compound. The garbage compound contained a bunch of garbage trucks where people would illegally dump their trash because for some reason it had no security. Given that it was the 4th of July, the county was having this huge party, but this person decided to stay home until they saw this. Out their window, they saw a mysterious white truck pull up to the garbage compound. Usually people would just drop off an old barbecue, some furniture, but this person was unloading some really suspicious black bags. The person looking out their window was pretty creeped out, so they called the cops just to be sure. So the cops went to the garbage compound, and when they opened the bag, they found dead bodies. The man just assumed that the bodies would get buried by all the trash from the 4th of July party, but thankfully he had no such luck.
It was the 4th of July, 2 days after my birthday. We live in a very quiet town in New Jersey, so not much was going on. I had just turned 21, so my girlfriend, who had already been 21 for a while, jokingly decided to come over to my house with a couple six-packs and some fireworks for the holiday. My parents were at one of the neighbors' parties far down the road. We don't have a lot of close-by neighbors. My girlfriend's name is Sophia. When she arrived, we headed to the backyard, where we started drinking the six-packs together. She brought 2 big firework missiles, a couple bottle rockets, and some firecrackers. Obviously the missiles were what caught my eye the most. When I finished my second beer, I got off the deck to shoot off the 2 bottle rockets. Up next were the firecrackers. After lighting up the firecrackers, however, I noticed my garage was open all the way across the yard. I told Sophia I'd be right back and walked over to it. I went inside and turned on the light. Every drawer and every closet door had been opened. I called my dad first thing and let him know somebody broke into the garage and possibly robbed us. He had a typical reaction.
Are you serious? Aw, shit. What did they take? I don't know,
I told him.
Alright, hang tight, I'll be home in a sec to check it out.
So my dad was momentarily leaving the party down the block to come check it out. When I got back to the deck, I told Sophia, and she was just in shock. She went to go look herself, and when she came back, we just sat there outside on the backyard deck, waiting. Eventually, I decided to just shoot off the big missiles anyway. I couldn't wait anymore, and it was July 4th after all. Sophia told me to go for it. The first missile was huge. It practically lit up the whole backyard for a second. I loved it. But I knew these 2 missiles were not cheap, so I thanked Sophia again. I lit the second missile, and during those initial few seconds as the fuse was burning, me and Sophia both heard a large branch snapping on the ground from the woods. We both looked in that direction, and as the rocket exploded in the sky, it provided just enough light to see a figure in the woods facing us. We both screamed simultaneously, just in time for my dad to hear. Me and my dad both chased in that direction into the woods, but we couldn't see or hear anything. We completely lost the person. Later that night, we turned on the security camera in the garage that we hadn't used in a long time. At maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, when I was finally going to bed, I looked out my window for the heck of it, and the garage light was on. Me and my dad went to check it out. This time the entire garage had been completely trashed, and some of my dad's expensive tools were missing. We went back to the house to check the surveillance footage, and we were disturbed. In the footage, the lights turned on, but the camera was blocked by something.
Something followed us home that night. The 4th of July, I'll never forget. I don't usually talk about this, not even with my own family. But every 4th of July, I feel it all over again. The air shifts. The silence at 11:59 p.m. feels heavy. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear the whispers in the woods. This happened in 2016 in North Carolina, where my mom's side of the family is from. We had this annual tradition of spending the 4th on our grandparents' property, an old tobacco farm with a huge open field, surrounded by deep woods on all sides. Real southern country vibes. No neighbors for miles, no street lights, and definitely no cell signals. It all started like any other holiday. The grill was going, the kids were running around, with sparklers, and adults were already 3 drinks in by sunset. Fireworks started around 9 p.m., the sky lit up in colors, and the children cheered like always. But around 10:15, everything stopped. I mean it. The firecrackers stopped, the laughter stopped, the wind gone. It was like the world suddenly hit pause. A high-pitched distance coming from the woods. We all froze. My uncle said, "Probably just a fox." But my little cousin Mia, she was shaking. "That wasn't no animal," she said. It said, "Help me." I don't know what possessed us, but me, James, and my older cousin Ty grabbed flashlights and started walking towards the tree lines. The deeper we went, the colder it got. And I swear, every time we turned back, the house looked further away. Then we saw something. A woman in a tone white dress standing by the tree with her back to us. She was whispering. James called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't move. Ty shined the flashlight on her. She had no face, just smooth, pale skin where her eyes, mouth, and nose should have been, like something had erased her. She turned her head slowly, and every bone in my body told me to run. We sprinted out of the woods like the devil himself was behind us. But the horror did not end. Back at the house, my mom was holding Mia. She looked terrified. She said a lady with no face was standing outside the window, whispering, "I know you can see me." That night, we all slept in the same room, light on, Bible open. But the next morning, it was worse. There was footprints in the yard, barefoot, small, leading from the woods to the backyard, to the back door. And they stopped, right at the window where Mia slept. It's been years, but every 4th of July since, strange things happened. Last year, our fireworks wouldn't light, but we heard fireworks in the woods. One year, a recording of the screaming played through my uncle's phone at 2 a.m., even though his phone was off. And Mia, she drew the faceless woman every year. Her therapist said that it's just trauma. But I know better. Something followed us home that night. And every Independence Day, she reminded us, we are never free. Oof, that is an interesting story. Okay.
My name's Ariel, and I live in Georgia, not too far from the Alabama border. Several summers ago, I made the drive out to this small town in Alabama for a 4th of July cookout my college friend Isabel was throwing. One of those backyard setups with paper plates, bootleg fireworks, and way too much food. It was one of the better nights I'd had in a while. Good people, good energy, kids running around with sparklers, that kind of thing. I didn't leave until a little after 10, which, looking back, was probably my first mistake. That part of the state gets real quiet once the sun goes down. The drive home was going to take a little over 2 hours. Most of the route was back roads, long, empty stretches of dark 2-lane roads with nothing but thick tree lines on either side. Every now and then, I'd pass an old farmhouse or a tiny church with a gravel lot, but for the most part, it was just darkness and more darkness. I had music playing low, and I was still in a good mood from the party, but I won't lie, there was something about driving through places like that at night that gets under my skin, even when there's no real reason to be afraid. I've always been somewhat scared of the dark, so I bet that plays into it a little too. About 30 minutes in, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured someone else had just hopped onto the same back road. But the longer it stayed there, the more I started to pay attention. It was a gray Nissan Altima, nothing unusual, except the bottom half of the car looked like it had been driving through mud. I could see it clearly anytime we passed one of those overhead lights at a small crossing. Even still, that wasn't that weird on its own. But after a while, I realized no matter how much I sped up or slowed down, that car matched me exactly. At first, I thought it might have been just a coincidence, so I sped up a little, maybe 5-10 miles an hour over what I was doing before, but the Altima did the same, so I instead tapped my brakes and let myself drift well below the limit. Again, same results. The distance between us never changed. Now keep in mind, on roads like that, people pass each other all the time. It's not even illegal in most spots. I moved slightly to the right a couple times to make it obvious that I was giving the space they needed if they wanted to go around, but they didn't. They just stayed exactly where they were, about 6 or 7 car lengths back. That's when I decided to test them. There was a random left turn coming up. It was what looked like a little residential road with maybe 4 houses scattered on either side. I took the turn with no hesitation. I wanted to get as far away from that car as possible. But about 10 seconds later, the car actually turned off and made the same left turn in the middle of nowhere. There was about a 0% chance they belonged on that road. At that point, I knew for a fact they were following me. It wasn't even up for debate anymore. I got this really sick feeling in my gut, like I was in genuine danger. For all I knew, I probably was. By then, my heart was beating through my chest, the same way it would if someone had a gun to my head. I don't know why, but that's the easiest analogy I can think of. I just felt so helpless out there in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea what that person wanted, or why they were locked on.
It was the 4th of July, just 2 days after my 21st birthday. We live in a very quiet town in New Jersey. Luckily, nothing much happened. My girlfriend, Sophia, jokingly decided to come over to my house with a couple of 6-packs and some fireworks to celebrate the holiday. My parents were attending a neighbor's party far down the road, and we don't have many close-by neighbors. When Sophia arrived, we headed to the backyard and started drinking the 6-packs together. She had brought 2 big firework missiles, a couple of bow rockets, and some firecrackers. I was particularly excited about the missiles. After finishing my second beer, I got off the deck to shoot off the 2 bottle rockets. Next, we lit up the firecrackers. However, while setting off the firecrackers, I noticed that my garage was wide open across the yard. I told Sophia I'd be right back and walked over to check it out. As I entered the garage and turned on the light, I was shocked to see that every drawer and closet door had been opened. I immediately called my dad and informed him that it seemed like someone had broken into the garage and possibly robbed us. He reacted typically, asking what they might have taken, to which I replied that I didn't know. He said he would come home to check it out. While waiting for my dad, I returned to the deck and told Sophia about the break-in. She went to see for herself, and when she came back, we anxiously waited outside in the backyard. Eventually, I couldn't wait any longer, so I decided to go ahead and shoot off the big missiles. It was the 4th of July after all, and Sophia encouraged me to do so. The first missile was huge and lit up the whole backyard for a second. I loved it, but I couldn't help but worry about the cost of these expensive missiles. I thanked Sophia once more, and then I lit the second missile. However, as the fuse was burning, both Sophia and I heard a loud branch snapping on the ground from the nearby woods. We quickly turned to look, and just as the rocket exploded in the sky, we saw a figure facing us. Our simultaneous screams alerted my dad, who came running to join us as we chased after the person into the woods. Unfortunately, we lost sight and couldn't find the intruder. Later that night, we decided to turn on the security cameras in the garage, which we hadn't used in a long time. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, as I was about to go to bed, I looked out my window for no particular reason, only to see that the garage light was on. Both my dad and I went to check it out, only to find that the entire garage had been completely trashed, and some of my dad's expensive tools were missing. We rushed back to the house to review the surveillance footage, hoping to find some clues. However, we were disturbed to see that the camera had been blocked by something when the lights turned on. The identity of the intruder remained a mystery, and we couldn't understand their intentions. It had certainly turned out to be a bizarre and unsettling 4th of July.
This is something that happened back when I was a 10-year-old kid. During this time, I lived with my parents and sister in a very populated neighborhood. It was a residential area with countless streets, houses, and parks. And every year on the 4th of July, there would be a huge parade. The parade route would go down our street every time. So we would go outside and sit on the edge of the yard and watch it. Our house was somewhat uphill from the road, so the yard slanted down a little and it gave a good view of the parade. The parade would be sometime in the late morning, and I remember on the year of this story, we went outside a while before it started. Some people had already started to gather around and sit on the curbs of the street and stuff. We went to our usual spot. I remember that my sister and I would always go really close to the street. Soon the parade started. I enjoyed it because a lot of the people that were in the parade would toss candy at the kids, and I would get a bunch every year. So the parade was going on, and there were tons of people involved. There were a lot of floats as well as people walking. The first thing strange that I noticed was that there was a guy who was dressed in a red, white, and blue jacket and a long beard. He was walking and waving to people and stuff, but then when he went past us, he appeared to walk into our yard. There were these two huge trees at the end of our yard. Well, one of the trees was in our yard, and the other was in our next door neighbor's property, technically. He sort of went between the two trees, and I didn't really know what he was doing there. That area is sort of out of the way, because there was also a really big bush nearby. But still, with all of these people around, I couldn't be the only one who noticed him, but it kind of seemed like I was. He went out of my sight though, appearing to go into our next door neighbor's property. I went right back to watching the parade at that point, and forgot all about it. As a kid, I didn't really think too much of it. The parade went on for probably another 20 or 30 minutes, and I had forgotten all about the man. When the parade ended, people slowly started to clear out. My family was going to my grandparents' house, who only lived a couple of miles away. We went back inside for maybe an hour and then left. So we were at my grandparents' until probably around sunset. At that time, I remember we left and headed back home. After the probably 5-minute drive back to our house, we got out of the car and headed inside. But when we got to the front door, I remember we noticed a couple of things that were strange. One was that the screen to our house was open a little. We had a screen door and then an actual door, and the screen door would never shut all the way unless you forced it shut, which we always did. So it seemed as though somebody had been to our door. Also, there were some flowers planted below a window out front, and some of them appeared to have been trampled. We realized somebody had been in our yard while we were away, and this person had either tried entering our front door or had knocked on it. We figured that with it being the 4th of July, there were probably a lot of people out in the neighborhood. Many people on the street were having barbecues and that sort of stuff. It's possible some people were just messing around and cut through our yard or something. Perhaps some teenagers or drunk young adults did it. Either way, we went inside the house, but were a little bit nervous. However, after turning on all the lights, everything seemed to be just fine. I quickly felt much better and was no longer worried. We were going to go out into the backyard and play with some sparklers. We were also going to have a fire in the small fire pit that we had in the yard and make s'mores. I can't remember what my parents and sister were busy doing inside, but they said that they would be out in a minute. I decided to go out into the backyard first. So I went into the dark backyard, which was only lit by a light in the back of the house. When I got back there, almost instantly after closing the back door, I heard a noise. I really wasn't sure what it was, but I knew that a bush had moved. In our neighborhood, with how populated it was, we really didn't get many animals. Maybe an occasional rabbit and lots of squirrels, but whatever made this noise was definitely much larger. I looked over in the direction, but did not see anything. There were several trees and bushes in the yard all around, and it wasn't well lit. I stayed out there, and after a few moments of nothing, I convinced myself that it was just some sort of an animal. I started to walk around the yard, just waiting for my parents and sister. During this time, I was walking near the back of the house when I saw something. There was something blue on the ground underneath a bush. I honestly don't know how I spotted it, but I walked over and looked closer. There was a big blue jacket, like the one the man in the parade had been wearing. It was all crumpled up and really small. I noticed that it was also red, white, and blue, and I looked inside the jacket, and there was a fake long white beard that the guy was wearing too. This probably belonged to the same guy who was walking into our yard at the parade. I then remembered that. I was creeped out and wanted to go back inside now. When I moved away from the bush, that's when I saw the guy. There was a man standing at the far back of our yard near the fence, and he was walking slowly along the edge of it. I quickly ran to the back door and went in. I locked the door behind me and found my parents. When I told them about the guy, they called the police. Then we waited inside without hearing or seeing anything from the man. When the police got there, they searched the backyard, but the man was gone. His things that he had hid in the bushes were also gone. After the police left, I was pretty nervous that the guy would return, but he didn't. I think that when he noticed I saw him, he must have decided to leave. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't noticed him.
I live in a normal suburban town. It was 4th of July weekend, so I had a mini party in my backyard. My parents were away, so it would work out perfectly. I invited about 20 people. We have a pool, so I told people to bring their bathing suits. I also had some fireworks left over from last year that I told everyone we'd shoot off towards the end of the night. I tried to keep the gathering strictly in the backyard because I didn't fully trust people not to make a mess inside the house. Everything went fine. Anywhere from 20 to 30 people showed up. Everyone stayed in the yard. Some people jumped in the pool, others played drinking games, and later in the night we shot off some fireworks in the street. The party started to die down after 12, and by 1:30 everyone was gone. There were a million red plastic cups in the yard and tons of empty cans and bottles. But that was a mess to worry about tomorrow. I was beat. I went inside and changed out of my clothes and brushed my teeth, then crawled into bed. I was pretty buzzed, so I didn't think I'd have any trouble falling asleep. Suddenly, outside, I heard firecrackers going off. It sounded like it was right outside my window, in our backyard. I got up and looked out the window, and to my confusion and downright horror, I saw a line of firecrackers going off next to our pool. My initial reaction was to yell out the window who did that. I figured it had to be one of my friends who stayed behind pranking me. I ran downstairs into the back door. I slid open the glass door but kept the bug screen door closed. I looked around the backyard and said again, "Who's out there?" By now the firecrackers had finished going off. Someone was back there, and they just set them off. That doesn't happen by accident. I texted as many people as I could think to, and then the group chat asking who was still at my house. Only a few people answered, most likely because a lot of people were asleep already. Everyone who answered said they're in bed or at home though. I stepped outside into the backyard and looked around for a minute, and when I saw no one, I went back in, shut the door and locked it, and went back upstairs to my room. I was barely in bed for 5 minutes before hearing something come from the upstairs living room down the hall. Then I heard the sound of a beer pong ball falling off the table and bouncing on the wood floor. My heart started to race. Was someone in the house? Did one of my friends pass out on one of the downstairs couches? Or maybe in one of the other bedrooms? While this seemed like a possibility, I wasn't about to go out there. I got out of bed and went to the door to put my ear up to it and listen. I didn't hear anything for a moment. I waited, and then, clear as day, I heard footsteps approaching my door, then the doorknob jiggling. The door was locked. There was a loud bang on the door. I screamed through the door to get out of here or I'll shoot you. A deep male's voice on the other side said, "Jay, you in there?" And I heard another deep voice in the room with me say, "Yeah." I turned to the corner by my drawers and realized there was someone there. I screamed my soul out as this man came over to me holding what looked like a gun in his hand. He then put his hand over my mouth and told me to shut up or he'd kill me. He then unlocked the door and opened it, and there was another masked man. They whispered to each other as they had me at gunpoint, now sitting on the bed. One of them then said to me, "Stay right there and don't move." The other guy left the room and went straight to my parents' room. He came back and asked the combination to my parents' safe, which I said I had no idea, which was the truth. There were a total of 3 intruders in the house. One kept me at gunpoint while the other 2 pilfered the house, stealing my mom's jewelry that was left out, along with any other valuables they found. After the longest 10 minutes of my life, one of the men yelled, "Let's go," and the man who had me at gunpoint left the room, and I heard them all hurry out the back door. I tried to see what kind of car they left in through a window, but it appeared they didn't park near my house. I called 911 right away. As soon as police arrived, they asked if we had any cameras around the house, which we didn't. They then asked if I got any of the names or saw any of their faces, and all I could give them was that one of them was referred to as Jay by the others. They asked if I saw the getaway vehicle, and I said no. The police asked a bunch of neighboring houses if they had cameras that may have picked up on the robbers, and after my neighbors all reviewed their doorbell cameras, none of them picked anything up. I think my house was targeted by a group who saw I was having a party, and they set the firecrackers off to lead me outside of the house so they could sneak in. That's the most likely explanation to me. My parents were livid with me for having the party, as they believed that led to the robbery. But they also were relieved I'm okay, and sympathetic that I had to experience this. Because of this experience, I'm a strong advocate for having security cameras around your house.
What if I told you an American town banned the 4th of July for 100 years? 4th of July banned for a century. In 1902, Newark, New Jersey lit up the sky with fireworks. Then everything went horribly wrong. Newark, NJ, July 4th, 1902. A massive explosion tore through the streets. Shrapnel, fire, chaos. 12 dead, dozens injured. 12 dead, over 70 injured. The city was traumatized. Officials banned fireworks and public July 4th celebrations for nearly a century. Banned until the 1990s. For generations, Newark stayed silent every Independence Day. No parades, no fireworks, just the memory. A holiday erased by tragedy. Most Americans have never heard this story. Now you have. Thanks for unboxing a piece of history with us. Subscribe for more.